Let's grow together. Let us please welcome once again for our message for today, Reverend Martin.
In the late 1960s, there was a book that hit the market called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it was written by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, who was a member of Raymond Charles Barker's religious science congregation in New York City. And the whole thing was an interesting psychological approach to what we teach here. And among other things, Dr. Maxwell Maltz said that we humans are goal-striving mechanisms, and our lives are all about pursuing goals. And I think that's true. Our lives are governed every day, at least in part, by goals. Big goals, such as home improvement goals, financial goals, career goals, retirement goals, travel goals, and of course those small goals, such as going to the library, getting a haircut, or seeing the new Superman movie. And whether your goals are reached may be determined by many factors, but the least important variable is where you started. There's an old saying which has several variations. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. Or some say it's not where you start, it's where you end up. Of course, if you finish where you started, that's not so good. I saw a cartoon years ago. A couple of hobos were sitting on a park bench, and one said to the other, "I started with nothing, and I still have most of it." It's not where you're from, it's where you're at. And it's not where you start, but whether you start. And these are all ways of saying that the final outcome or destination is more important than the initial circumstances or starting point in life. Now, many people who start life with every advantage end up as failures, and many people who faced unbelievable hardships are among our greatest achievers. What made the difference? Well, that's what we'll be looking at this morning. In 2017, the Masters Track and Field Championships were held in Albuquerque. Now, I've performed in Albuquerque, and I can tell you that a little-known fact about that city is that the elevation is just about the same as Denver. The air is very thin. You can get fatigued quite easily. But that's where the 2017 Masters Track and Field Championships were held. And Dixon Hemphill, one of the contestants, competed in 5 events in 3 days. But it was one of those races that caught people's attention. Dixon Hemphill ran the 60-meter sprint in 18.5 seconds. 60 meters in 18.5 seconds. Here's the surprise. Dixon Hemphill was 92 years old. Hemphill had been a fixture in the Washington, D.C. area running community for over half a century. A former collegiate pole vaulter, high jumper, and discus thrower back in the 1940s, he took up racing at the age of 50 and competed in several distance and dash events as a member of the Potomac Valley Track Club. And a serious bicycle accident in 1999 nearly ended his running career. But Hemphill recovered from a collapsed lung, several broken ribs, and a fractured pelvis to resume racing. And even hip replacement surgery didn't slow him down or discourage him. He trained 3 times a week at George Mason University's track and had a personal coach to help him regain his expertise. And he maintained a healthy diet and did exercises for strength, balance, and flexibility in addition to his track workouts. A remarkable man by any standard. But here's surprise number 2. Dixon Hemphill did not win the race in Albuquerque. Orville Rogers did. He won by running the 60-meter sprint in 18 seconds, 1/2 second faster than Dixon Hemphill. Which brings us to surprise number 3. Orville Rogers was 99 years old. Now, this narrow loss to Rogers convinced Hemphill that he needed to beef up his training. He said, I just want to run faster than I'm running. I'm not doing long distance running, so I want to add at least 2 or 3 miles. Orville Rogers is doing more mileage than me in a week. That's not right. I should be doing more. I think it'll make a difference. Well, even though you may never have heard of Orville Rogers, he was famous in the world of masters running. He held 13 world records for runners in his age group and trained meticulously to ensure that he didn't lose his spot in the record books to young whippersnappers like 92-year-old Dixon Hemphill. At the age of 50, Orville had read Dr. Kenneth Cooper's book, Aerobics, which inspired him to start running. His workout routine included running 3 miles, followed by a 100-meter wind sprint. And he did this 3 times a week. And he competed in his first national track meet at the age of 90. He competed until he was 101 years old, and he made his transition into the next great adventure just 2 weeks shy of his 101st birthday. And like Dixon Hemphill, Orville Rogers credited diet and exercise for his success. No secrets there. What then was his winning edge? Well, there is one more thing, but you're going to have to wait a few minutes for that. In the meantime, the rest of us can hope that we're half as able and active as Rogers and Hemphill if we're fortunate enough to make it to their age. So, is there such a thing as a formula for success? A formula that gets you to the finish line effectively, regardless of where you started? Well, any formula has ingredients, and it's here that things get interesting. Let's take a look at effort. We've all been taught that in order to succeed, there's no substitute for hard work. But millions of people work hard with very little to show for it. After all, breaking up boulders with a sledgehammer is hard work, but after splitting boulders into rocks and busting rocks into smaller rocks and pounding smaller rocks into still smaller rocks, what do you have? Sore muscles and a pile of gravel. It's hard work, and you'd be smarter to buy gravel and be done with it. But the people who get on in life are the people who work with a purpose. People who analyze what's working and what's not working and how they can work smarter and better. And most of the great advances and inventions of history have been the result of people who decided there must be a better way, and they were determined to find it. And so we wonder, how much does talent count? And what about persistence? Thomas Edison famously said, many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. Now, Edison, of course, is just about as famous for his persistence as his invention, creativity. After all, he was the man who perfected the light bulb. And if effort is the bedrock of success, then what role does intelligence play? Well, many studies suggest that only about 25% or less of the differences in job performance from one to another is related to IQ. Other factors, such as persistence and creativity, are said to make up the other 75%. Now, if 25% seems surprisingly low, that's partly because the hard work and determination that go into accomplishing something important are overshadowed by those lightning strikes of inspiration, those aha moments that only seem to come to those who've already done the hard work. David Baker, a professor of creative writing, says, No one comes in my window and whispers poems to me. Poets work hard. I may work on a single poem for weeks or months and write 60 or 70 drafts, only to decide that draft number 22 was the good one. Persistence is key, even for a genius. Mozart's diaries contain a famous passage in which the composer wrote that an entire symphony appeared fully intact in his head. But no one ever quotes the next paragraph, where he talks about how he refined that composition for months. Neurobiologists Angela Duckworth teamed up with the psychologist Martin Seligman, who's best known for his groundbreaking work on optimism. And together they began identifying high achievers in various fields, interviewing them and describing the characteristics that distinguished them. And Professor Duckworth says, there were certainly a fair number of people who were brilliant, ambitious, and persevering. But there were also a lot who were not a genius in any way, but they were really tenacious. And so they began referring to this tenacity as grit, the determination to accomplish an ambitious long-term goal, regardless of where they started and despite the inevitable obstacles. Well, what about passion? Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "Enthusiasm is one of the most powerful engines of success. When you do a thing, do it with all your might. Put your whole soul into it. Stamp it with your own personality. Be active, be energetic, be enthusiastic and faithful, and you will accomplish your object." Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. Well, it's one thing to be enthusiastic about something in the beginning, but as time goes on, it becomes easier and easier to become bored, frustrated, and burned out. And once that happens, it's difficult to continue doing the work needed for success. But as Emerson said, nothing great has ever been achieved without enthusiasm, without passion, without joy. You just don't have the energy to keep things fresh, to keep learning, and to feel good about it. Sometimes it takes work to be enthusiastic about a long-term project, especially a challenging one. But perseverance can by itself generate passion. Often, the most fascinating aspects of a subject or a project are only discovered after a deep dive to a level where you really understand it and are inspired by it. In other words, the more you know about something, the more motivated you'll be to learn and experience still more. Whether it's an arts and crafts project, working in your flower beds, running a race, or maintaining your spiritual practices, total involvement in what you're doing lets loose giant waves of the creative power of now. If you can keep your eyes on what you love about your dream, you'll find enthusiasm even in the tough times, because enthusiasm is a choice, like most everything else in life. So don't sit around waiting for enthusiasm to jolt you into action. Act on your goals, and that activity will generate passion. And besides, what a wonderful thing it is to have the opportunity to do something you love every single day. And there's one more thing to this winning edge. In addition to self-discipline, optimism, the willingness to take risks and try new things, the ability to feel the fear and still move forward. The faith to know that whatever we try, the universe is rooting for us. And of course, there are many axioms about success. Within every adversity is the seed of an equal and opposite benefit. Successful people continually learn. Unsuccessful people fly by the seat of their pants. Successful people listen first and never stop listening. Unsuccessful people talk too much. And so it goes. Looking at the elements of successful living, one more principle stands out, and we can call it the principle of a little more. That is, small differences in ability and effort can translate into enormous differences in results if we keep a little more as our watchword. If you're working on a dream project for 2 hours a day and you're not getting where you want to be, that doesn't necessarily mean that you suddenly start working 6 hours a day. You may not be able to make yourself do that. It could be that just an extra 20 or 30 minutes per day might be enough to make a big difference. Do you tend to quit working too soon? To give up too easily? Think just a little more. I saw an interview with a man who was recovering from a nearly fatal auto accident, and he was undergoing long, frustrating, and painful physical therapy to regain mobility, strength, and balance. And his therapists all commented on how well he was doing, even though his progress was painfully slow. His secret? No matter how tired, frustrated, or in pain he was, he would tell himself, I can do this for 1 more minute. And at the end of that minute, he could say, okay, I did that. I can go for 1 more minute. He wasn't trying to be Superman. He wasn't trying to heal himself in 1 marathon session. He was just trying to do a little more. And so often in life, what separates failure from success is just a little thing. Think about this for a moment. At 211 degrees Fahrenheit, water is merely hot, but 1 more degree, and it's boiling. Just 1 additional amount of right action can mean success. So remember that the next time you're tempted to give up or give in, just a little more. So, we've looked at some of the things that get us to our goal: hard work, persistence, applied intelligence, and passion. But what if that's not enough? After all, a lot of people have those qualities, or at least they work at them. Remember Orville Rogers? I told you that he credited his victory at age 99 to diet, exercise, and one more thing. And here is that little something extra in his own words. I started years ago visualizing success in whatever race I participate in. And that's still my objective. I train hard, and I visualize crossing the finish line out in front. And I work at it pretty consistently. It's very rewarding to be able to accomplish what you set out to do. Call it visualization, imagination, or constructive daydreaming. It's perhaps the most powerful success technique in our arsenal. We know that every great achievement begins in the mind, begins as an idea that did not exist before the moment it was conceived, an idea that, when pursued, led to all of the supporting ideas and resources necessary to turn that idea into reality. Couple more stories that illustrate the principle that it's not where you start, it's where you finished. She battled depression, financial difficulties, grieving over the death of her mother, and having to raise a child by herself while living on welfare. She found comfort in working on her writing while her little daughter slept. And once the first few chapters of her first book were finished, She sent the manuscript to publishers who rejected her right, left, and center. But finally, the Bloomsbury Publishing Company agreed to publish the book, but they warned her that she'd better get a day job because being a children's author doesn't pay enough to feed a family. But J.K. Rowling was the first author ever to become a billionaire. Her Harry Potter series has sold more than 500 million copies worldwide. And the movie versions of her book are raking in additional billions. And Rowling summed up her journey as follows: "You might never fail on the scale I did, but some failure in life is inevitable. It is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default." Another story. She was born to a single teenage mother who, for the first few years of her life, left her to be raised by her maternal grandmother. And she was eventually sent back to live with her mother when her grandmother fell ill. Extreme poverty and childhood sexual abuse prompted her to run away from home at the age of 13. And by the age of 14, she had had her first child, who died shortly thereafter. But things started turning around during her high school and college years. She started reading the news for a local radio station. And after she graduated college, she became a TV news anchor and then a host for the talk show People Are Talking. And it wasn't long before her own show, The Oprah Winfrey Show, took off. And here's what she had to say about her success journey. "I don't think of myself as a poor, deprived ghetto girl who made good. I think of myself as somebody who, from an early age, knew that I was responsible for myself and I had to make good." Henry Ford said, "You can have anything you can imagine yourself as having," which was just his way of paraphrasing Jesus, who said, "Believe that you have got it, and you will have it." You have the capacity to create pictures, patterns, and plans in your mind, and life, being responsive, flows into experience for you based on those pictures, patterns, and plans. We all have the capacity for imagination, and we all use it, either consciously or unconsciously, to bring into our experience that which we imagine. The mental pictures which you create and accept for yourself are the patterns that you hand to life. Your imagination is the engineering part of your mind, drawing up blueprints that life follows when building your future. Our primary creative job is to imagine consciously, vividly, clearly, and distinctly. And having created a mental and spiritual prototype, to the degree that we stay clearly focused on it, to the degree that our faith is unwavering, the universe cannot fail to faithfully produce in form or experience that very thing. When you imagine yourself as a success, when you feel that you're a success, you must succeed, because life will automatically move you in that direction. It has no choice but to do this. It can't say no to you. It must go to work for you in exact correspondence to whatever it is you truly believe. Life is continually opening up new channels to prove to you that you can be whatever you believe yourself to be, and you can have whatever you believe you can have. It's what Emile Coué was getting at when he advocated the affirmation, "Every day, in every way, I am getting better and better and better." If that's our attitude, our belief, our feeling about whatever we wish to do. We cannot fail. We, in partnership with the universal mind, will figure out a way to do and have whatever we desire. It's up to us to use our imagination positively, creatively, and with purpose. It's up to us to live in the consciousness of already having what we desire. It's up to us to build up that feeling of success or health or happiness or whatever it is that we desire from life. It worked for Orville Rogers. He played the game of life for 101 years, and if there were a better way to approach life, you'd think he would have found it. By the way, Orville Rogers and Dixon Hemphill were friendly competitors. They always looked forward to competing with each other, and they motivated each other to train harder, to go faster, to do just a little more. The winning edge is not in what we look at, but what we see. Moses looked at people who were enslaved in Pharaoh's Egypt and saw them free and happy in their own land. Jesus looked at people who felt beholden to priests and oppressed by foreign occupiers and saw individuals who could experience the power of the divine in their own lives, experience it for themselves, within themselves. Henry Ford looked at automobiles, which were rich people's toys, and saw vehicles that could be afforded by everyone, including his own factory workers. Thomas Edison looked at and listened to the rhythms of life and saw a way to capture those moving sights and sounds forever. He looked at candles and saw a way to produce light without a flame. Sir Alexander Fleming looked at mold in a petri dish and saw life-saving penicillin. Mother Teresa looked at the poorest of the poor, the filthy, the wretched, and saw children of God who needed love in action. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, had virtually no formal education and certainly no seminary training, but he saw an eternal truth and figured out a way to use it. In every age, we've used imagination to move us forward. Sometimes we've missed and we paid the price for our own ignorance, but we learned from our failures and visualized something different the next time around. And every step of the way, the universal creative intelligence out of which we are all made did whatever was necessary to reveal to us what was needed to fulfill our vision. We're always identifying ourselves with something. We're always believing something to be true about ourselves. We're constantly saying we are sick or well, rich or poor. When we say, I'm unlucky, or I'm sick, or I am poor, we're giving the universal mind a definite plan of action, not realizing the damage we're doing to ourselves. The book of Psalms says, let the weak say, I am strong. Let the sick say, I am well. Did you catch the magic words there? I am. I am strong. I am well. I am loved. I am talented. I am deserving of every good thing that life has to offer. You can't see this, but in my notes, every time I write the words I am, I do it in all capital letters. Now, sometime this week, when you're feeling a little tired, or perhaps you're upset, go to a quiet place, get relaxed, and say this to yourself. Since I am an incarnation of perfect life, I can be, I can do, and I can have all that is normal and right for me to be, do, and have. I can experience what I should experience. My real self is the mighty power of the universe. I can do what is right for me to do. I can have what is right for me to have. I can be that which is right for me to be. I am, therefore, I can. I can. That's a statement of potential. Now, having established a consciousness of infinite possibility, what I refer to as the I am consciousness, try saying it this way. Since I am an incarnation of perfect life, I am all that I am created to be, I am doing all that I am created to do, and I have all that I am created to have. I now experience all that I am created to experience. My real self is the mighty power of the universe. I am now doing what is right for me to do. I now have what is right for me to have. I am that which is right for me to be. I am. I am. I am. Knowing the truth about yourself, applying the truth you know to yourself, and beginning to express that truth in every action, you can change your whole outlook and experience. And when you do this, you'll be using the intelligence and power of the universal creative mind, which is all the intelligence and power there is. There is no power to oppose it. There's a song from a Broadway musical called Seesaw. Title of the song is It's Not Where You Start, It's Where You Finish. And the lyrics include these thoughts. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. It's not how you go, it's where you land. 100 to 1 shot, they called you a klutz, but you can outrun the favorite. All you need is the guts. Your final return will not diminish, and you can be the cream of the crop. It's not where you start, it's where you finish, and you're going to finish on top. I am, I am, I am. Be it, live it, do it, and so it is.